Have you noticed that the people who burn out are very rarely the people that anyone else would describe as lazy? In fact, they are usually the opposite. And I say they, I actually mean we, because this is something that I have experienced too. And I'd say that those of us who end up burning out are the ones that other people would usually call the reliable one, or the capable one, or the person that everybody turns to when something needs sorting out. Or maybe the one who can always be relied upon to say yes, the one who always copes, or at least seems to. And I wanted to start by acknowledging that because I don't think that burnout is a hard work problem. I think it's more of a self-abandonment problem. So today I want to talk about why the people who often burn out are the ones who are holding it all together. I want to talk about why simply resting is not going to stop burnout happening, and what actually needs to change for you if you don't want to find yourself back in exactly the same place in the very near future. Hello and welcome to Notes on Vulnerability. My name is Alex and I'm a resilience coach, and I am here to help you find freedom from whatever is keeping you stuck right now so that you can actually thrive at life. I work with the mind and the nervous system to make changing your life really, really simple and so fucking satisfying. This is season 4 of Notes on Vulnerability, in which you will find some fantastic interviews with really inspiring people, as well as shorter episodes like this, where I am sharing some insights and ideas that I think it'd be really useful for a lot of us to hear right now. Because if there is one thing I've learned as a resilience coach, it's that we make life so much harder than it really needs to be. And there is no doubt that burnout is as hard as it gets. Today's episode feels like an important one because burnout is something that I know personally. It's also something that I regularly see as a coach. A lot of people come to me to help recover from burnout and change the patterns that caused it in the first place. And one of the things I've noticed is that almost everyone who reaches burnout tends to ask themselves the same question at that point. And the question is usually, what's wrong with me? That's the main question, but we also tend to harangue ourselves with kind of other questions like, why can't I cope? Why is everyone managing so much better than me? Why am I struggling with the things that other people seem to handle perfectly well? And honestly, I just think these are the wrong questions to be asking, partly because they make us feel defensive and less than other people. And that's never a good place to start seeking information from. But also because if you're only looking at burnout through the lens of the load that you are carrying, you're really missing what's going on underneath. The idea of burnout often comes with this image of, someone working ridiculously hard hours in an office, answering emails until midnight, and surviving on chocolate and coffee, or juggling a million life plates, from kids to a job to caring responsibilities. And yes, sometimes that is exactly what's happening when burnout rears its head. But I've also worked with people who were very burnt out, who weren't working particularly long hours, people who had reduced their workload to try and help themselves, who had taken holidays or gone part-time or really stepped back from the pressures in their life. And yet they still felt utterly exhausted. The reason that I'm highlighting this is that burnout isn't just about feeling a little bit tired or about the body becoming run down. And that is why rest on its own isn't always going to fix the problem. I'm definitely not saying that rest is not important, because obviously it is. If you have burned out, then your nervous system really needs recovery, and rest is an important part of that. But I do think that we sometimes believe that burnout is just the result of having done too much. And I think what we're missing here is it's actually the result of having done too much while constantly abandoning yourself in the process of that, because that's not the same thing. You can work incredibly hard without burning out if your nervous system feels supported, your relationships are healthy, you have good boundaries, you're looking after yourself, your self-care is high, and you're living in alignment with your authentic self. Equally, you can burn out doing far less if every single day you're overriding what your mind and body are trying to tell you. One of the things I notice repeatedly as a resilience coach is that people who burn out are often incredibly good at looking after everyone else around them, but not themselves. This is a real theme and a real problem. And there are lots of signs that point towards this. In particular, when someone says something about that person, such as, I don't know what we'd do without you. It sounds lovely, doesn't it, to be kind of needed that much? But whenever I hear that, it always slightly sets my teeth on edge. Because to me, that indicates that the equilibrium in those relationships somewhere is off. Because the person that nobody is looking after is the one who's doing everything for everyone else. So rather than looking after their own needs and making sure that they don't burn out, The people who do are often anticipating other people's needs. They frequently say yes when actually they mean no. And they will keep going regardless, often because everyone around them has made it clear that they're relying on them. These are the people who will convince themselves that they will rest once the deadline has passed, for example, once the children are older, or once work calms down, or once they've finished this one last thing. Except, of course, there is always one last thing. There is always going to be another reason not to stop and prioritize yourself. And if you keep doing this year after year, eventually your nervous system is going to stop trying to negotiate with the burden and just force you into shutting down. One of the biggest shifts people tend to experience with me in resilience coaching is understanding that your nervous system really doesn't give a fuck whether something is important to your life. What your nervous system is constantly looking for is safety and anything that threatens that safety. That's its job. The nervous system is not the part of you that is trying to help you achieve your dreams, for example. Don't get me wrong, having a regulated nervous system is going to be vital for helping you to achieve your dreams, but that's not why the nervous system exists. The job of the nervous system is to keep you alive and to identify anything that might be a threat to that and essentially take it off the table. So if you've spent a lot of your life thinking to yourself, I'll just keep pushing right now, I'll deal with it later, everyone else needs me first, your nervous system is actually hearing we're under threat constantly because you are self-abandoning. And so the nervous system does what the nervous system is designed to do. Where there is a constant threat to your survival, it remains in survival mode almost permanently. Initially, that can look like ongoing low-level anxiety or a lack of sleep. Maybe you start to feel kind of permanently wired. You might find yourself becoming overly emotional and experiencing brain fog. Maybe you start becoming a bit snappy with the people around you, and then you start getting really overwhelmed by things that actually never used to bother you. If you don't see these things as the red flags that they are, which so many of us don't, because we just start getting frustrated with ourselves and calling ourselves names and comparing ourselves to other people. But if you don't see these things as red flags, then your nervous system will take the next step. And it is a clever step in that it is designed to save your life. But it's also the step that none of us wants, because what happens is your nervous system starts shutting things down. From the perspective of keeping you alive, from a survival perspective, slowing down is safer than letting you just carry on at the pace that you have been going. So it is clever. And that is what's really happening when it comes to burnout. It's just a physiological response to your life based on internal environment and coping mechanisms. But of course, that's not the whole story either. Something I really want to talk about is the shame that often comes with this kind of shutdown, because very few of us respond with compassion when our bodies do this. Instead, we choose self-criticism and we start thinking things like, I'm obviously not resilient enough, or other people cope, or I should be stronger than this. But this is just not a helpful thought process to have. It's not an objectively productive way to think, given that self-criticism will further activate your stress response. And B, you're often comparing yourself to people whose circumstances you know nothing about. Maybe they have much more support than you do. Maybe they don't carry the same emotional load as you. Maybe they learned boundaries growing up and they find it easy to set them. Maybe they don't feel responsible for everyone else's happiness. Maybe they have a totally different nervous system. You're comparing your own internal experience with somebody else's external presentation, and those things are never going to match, and they're never going to work out in your favor either. Something else that I've noticed is that burnout has a way of changing your identity, and I don't think that we address this enough, especially because identity is what all of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors tend to line up behind. The way you see yourself is the way you will behave, how you will feel. It influences everything. And the danger here is that when you are burning out or when you have burned out, you stop thinking thoughts about yourself like, I'm someone who's having a difficult time, i.e. this is temporary, and you start thinking thoughts like, I am someone who cannot cope. That's an identity statement. And it's a really dangerous shift, because once you change your identity like this, your brain will begin to look for evidence that that identity statement is true. And your brain is really good at finding evidence to support whatever you believe about yourself. This is called the confirmation bias. In these circumstances, you will find that every difficult day becomes proof of that identity statement, that you can't cope. Every mistake you make is going to become proof of that. Every moment of tiredness will line up behind that identity statement that you cannot cope. Even if those things aren't proof at all, your brain stores them up in the burnout evidence file and creates a story about you around them, often a very unhelpful story about how able you are to handle your life. It's one of the reasons that burnout tends to feel so hopeless. You're not just exhausted, you've actually started believing a really hard and negative story about who you are. Because identity is so foundational to life experience, it's one of the first things that we look at in resilience coaching, not just unpicking an unhelpful identity that has arrived with burnout, but establishing a brand new one that will empower you to move past burnout and into the life you really want. A more optimistic and powerful identity that will mean that your brain starts collecting a very different type of evidence. Because burnout is not your identity. It's not permanent. It's not who you are. It's an experience that you're having, and it's really important to remember that distinction because those are not the same thing. But we do so often mix them up and with pretty disastrous results. Something else that wastes a lot of energy in burnout recovery that I see in people who come to me for help with this is people trying to recover from burnout without actually changing any of the patterns that caused it in the first place. And it seems obvious when you say it like that, but there can be such a desire to get away from that burnout identity that, as soon as we feel a little bit better, we just want to forget about the whole thing, which is understandable. As soon as we get some rest and we feel a tiny bit better, then we go straight back to saying yes to everything, people pleasing, proving ourselves, ignoring the fact that we were overwhelmed. And 6 months later, we are right back where we started. I think the key point I'm trying to make about this is that burnout recovery isn't just about getting your energy back. If you really want to do it properly, then you've got to focus on making sure that your life no longer requires you to continuously abandon yourself to function. That's the key thing here. And that is a much deeper shift to make in your life. And it's why the kind of coaching that I do really isn't about becoming someone who can just tolerate more stress. That's not what resilience is. It's about changing the relationship that you have with yourself so that you feel genuinely supported going forward. If you've recognized yourself anywhere in today's episode, I really want to say this. Burnout is not evidence that you have failed. It's evidence that something in your life has stopped being sustainable. That is it. I know a lot of people who go through this and think that reaching burnout is a sign of weakness somehow. But the truth is, it's actually indicating that you've been strong for far too long, that you are too strong, that you've been keeping your head above water, making sure everyone else is afloat, ignoring your own needs. It's that strength that eventually led to your mind and body saying to you, we cannot do this anymore. As uncomfortable as burnout is, and I know that from personal experience, I also think it can become an incredibly important turning point for us. We don't have to convert everything that happens to us in life into a teaching moment, obviously. But when it comes to burnout, there is such a lot of useful information in here because burnout really forces us to ask questions that we might never have otherwise asked of ourselves, to look really deep at who we are and what we're actually doing. For example, where does my sense of self-worth come from? Why do I find it so hard to say no? Why do I always put myself last? Why do I believe that rest has to be earned? Answering those questions won't just help you recover from burnout. It can also help you to build a very different life, one that is more aligned with who you really are, how you function, and what is going to light you up going forward instead of burning you out. Because burnout is something I deal with so often as a resilience coach, there are a few practical things I want everyone listening to do if you are feeling close to burnout or you are trying to recover from it. That's why I've put together something completely free called 7 Days Back from Burnout. It's a series of 7 short videos, each only a couple of minutes long, that walk you through the areas of burnout recovery that I think matter most. So we will look at your nervous system, for example, resetting the habits that tend to make burnout worse, understanding that burnout identity and changing it, untangling the relationship that you might have formed between effort and self-worth, rediscovering joy and why joy actually isn't the reward for healing, but part of the healing process that we so often miss out. The video series is all about learning from burnout instead of simply surviving it and then just going back to your old patterns. And it's about creating burnout prevention, a burnout prevention plan so that you don't have to keep coming back here. Obviously, you're not going to cure the whole of your burnout experience in 7 days, but these are some useful steps to take in the right direction. And if today's episode has resonated with you, I think you'd find the series really helpful. You'll find the link to the series in the show notes. And if after watching it, you realize you would like some more personalized support with burnout recovery from me, then that is exactly what resilience coaching is for. You can book a free intro call with me through the link in the show notes, where we can talk about where you are, what's brought you here, and whether resilience coaching feels like the right next step. As always, thank you for watching or listening. And if you are enjoying this series of Notes on Vulnerability, I would be so grateful if you could leave me a review, either on Spotify and iTunes, or like and share and comment on this post on YouTube. Take care of yourself this week, and I will see you in the next episode.
Resilience isn't about avoiding stress, it's about meeting it with strength. This adaptogenic trio is called our chill mix for a reason. Our award-winning calm and collected formula is a favourite among people with busy, anxious brains. I have combined lion's mane, ashwagandha and holy basil with sea greens to ease your racing mind and calm a jittery body. Consistency is key when it comes to adaptogens, so make calm and collected part of your evening ritual for calm, resilience and rest.